Well, Ladybarn Park is special to me because it's the first home venue that I had as a local footballer. I never was any good in terms of being able to play professionally, although when we grow up we all want to be professional footballers, professional cricketers, or whatever our particular sport is. I moved with my family, we moved up to Manchester from Shropshire. I'm a poor, proud Salopian, really, and I moved to Fallowfield in South Manchester and started a football team when I was about 13 and 14. In fact, it was in 1959. And we called that football team Sherwood Forest because we all lived in the Sherwood area of Fallowfield. Sherwood Pub, Sherwood Street, Sherwood Avenue, Sherwood Close. And Nottingham Forest had just won the FA Cup in 1959. So we thought it was a good idea collectively to call ourselves Sherwood Forest. And we actually played one or two friendlies here at Ladybarn Park. We played in green. We held jumble sales and managed to raise enough money to buy our kit and corner flags and footballs, and we set ourselves up. I take great pride in suggesting it and running the team, and we joined the local league, under 17s, Levenshulme Amateur League, and this was our home venue. That's me, the captain, with the ball there. Keith Tanner, Peter Mellor, who later went on to play for Fulham, you know, in the FA Cup final of 1975. Sadly, they lost 2-1 to West Ham. But Peter Mellor was an excellent goalkeeper. He was younger than the rest of us, but he was an excellent keeper. David Wright, Singwa Chang, Johnny Grant, Johnny Mullen, sadly whose funeral I went to last year, Andy Williams lived round the corner from me, Trevor Gill, myself, John Gwynne, Ernie Mainwaring, and Brian Bostock. There's the Sherwood Forest team that played in Ladybarn Park here, where this picture was taken in 1961. There were goalposts in those days on that wonderful verdant background that you see. This is really where my life in football started as a player, and therefore, you know, really my interest really came to light. Although prior to that, I used to go and watch my local village team in Shropshire, and I remember my dad, when I was 10 years of age in 1955, allowing me to go for the very first time to watch a league football match, Shrewsbury Town versus Brighton and Hove Albion, in the 3rd Division South, October the 1st, 1955, and Shrewsbury won 2-1. And I still look for their results now, 60 years later, 62 years later. If my first team now is Manchester City and has been for 60 years, but I always look for Shrewsbury's results as well still. We moved to Manchester in 1957. I was a 12-year-old kid, couldn't wait to get here. All I wanted to do was go and see the Busby Babes, Man United. Where I lived in Fallowfield, though, wasn't as easy for a poor country yokel like me to suddenly haul myself several miles across the south of the city to Old Trafford, whereas I could walk to Main Road in 20 minutes. And my best mate at school, Charlie Hadfield, was a massive City fan. He was dyed in the wool blue, and he used to drive me daft talking about them. And one day he managed to persuade me to go to Main Road. They played Portsmouth, who included the great Jimmy Dickinson, and City won 2-1, and I was hooked then, and have been ever since. I did see Manchester United play for the very first time 3 months later in the Manchester Derby, and the reason I mention that, I was thrilled to see the Reds for the very first time because they're such a famous team, Matt Busby's team. I did see the great Duncan Edwards play once, and Tommy Taylor and all those, in a 2-2 draw against City, and 6 weeks later they perished. Maybe that's for another day, of course, but I do remember seeing just once that pre-Munich Manchester United. But yes, I was a dyed-in-the-wool City fan myself, and ever since then, of course, it's been a roller coaster ride, swings and roundabouts, I suppose you could say, rather appropriately. City now, as we speak, unbeaten still, playing absolutely wonderful football. And we have been playing some very, very attractive football now for 6 or 7 years since the Sheikh came in and, well, shook the club around, and really it was a shake-up in a literal sense. And when we won the league in 2012 with that famous Aguero goal, I was there that day. But this season it really does look as though it's going to reap rewards, maybe in Europe as well as domestically. But football's a funny game, and when you're a Manchester City fan, I'm sure other supporters of other clubs have the same feeling. You never take anything for granted. I've seen them in the third tier, so it is brilliant at the moment. But over the years, it's been a case of occasional success and rather more than occasional failures. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that Soccer Saturday and Jeff Stelling, because it's almost 20 years to the day since I did my first game for them at Blackpool, 4-3 against Blythe Spartans in the FA Cup. Yeah, I've had 20 good years doing that. It was Jeff who got me involved in that, because he used to front the darts when I was a darts commentator, and we used to get on very well, and he got me onto that programme. But it all started, I was a school teacher initially. I taught for 20 years in Manchester schools, and when I didn't get a particular job that I thought I was entitled to, I rather got upset, and I decided to write to the two local radio stations asking if they'd give me an audition. I was then 35, you could call it middle-aged sort of discontent, if you like, and I got a reply immediately from Piccadilly Radio in Manchester, which was a very popular radio station, and the head of sport there was a certain Richard Keys, who people know now, of course, from his television appearances, and he said, would you like to do a football match? And I said, yeah. So he gave me a game. It was a FA Cup match, Chester City against Northwich Victoria. We were following Northwich, and that was my first ever game, and all he wanted was a 30-second report, and I think that was really an audition. And it went out on air. I heard it on the radio when I was on my way home, and after that I got regular work with Piccadilly Radio. I was still teaching, but I was able to give up teaching in 87, because by then I was doing all sorts of things, not just with football but with darts, a bit of cricket as well, and my ambition to become a sports commentator was beginning to be realised. And those first few years I did football for Piccadilly Radio, doing Bolton, Bury, Oldham, Wigan, Stockport County, mustn't forget them, or Rochdale, all the teams around Manchester other than City and United, if you like. And then I moved across to the BBC and Radio Manchester, and I became their Oldham athletic correspondent, and that was fantastic, because it was for 4 seasons when Oldham won the old second division, had a wonderful side on the plastic pitch. They battered everybody on the plastic pitch. They played a very attractive brand of football. They had to do away with the plastic pitch and revert to turf, but they were very good. They went down in 94 back into the second tier, and that was when I finished, and by then I was doing solid cricket work for the BBC, covering Lancashire cricket as well as doing darts. So I was a busy man, and I then went doing football for Radio London, BBC Radio London, doing the London teams up north. So one week I'd have Scunthorpe and Millwall. The following week I had Everton and Spurs. One week it would be Burnley, who were then in the third tier, against Leyton Orient, and then the following week I'd have City and West Ham. So I really enjoyed doing that for Radio London. And then, as I say, in 97, 20 years ago, Jeff Stelling arranged for me to go and do some Soccer Saturday. He said, we've got a new programme coming up called Soccer Saturday, John. I'm sure you'd like to be part of it. And I still am today, 20 years on.
Is there one football match that stands out as the best you've ever seen?
Oh, it's got to be Manchester City QPR, May the 13th, 2012. We're 2-1 down, coming towards 90 minutes, against 10 men. They've gone 2-1 up with 10 men because Joey Barton had got sent off. And then Jacko scored. And we knew that United were winning at Sunderland, and if that was the case, City had to win and win the league on goal difference. So it was a lost cause, really. But Dzeko did get that header on 90 minutes. The board went up. I can't remember whether it was 3, 4 or 5 minutes stoppage time. And my friend Charlie Hadfield, the same Charlie Hadfield I was sitting next to that very day, he disappeared. He said, I can't bear this. And I said, you never know, Sunderland might score up there at the Stadium of Light. I said, and we might get another. He said, you're hoping beyond all hope. And then Balotelli had the presence of mind to push that ball. He was down on the ground into the path of Aguero, and he shot it into the net. And it was just unbelievable. And you wouldn't believe this, but 4 months later to the day, on September the 13th, I had the great pleasure of hosting a big dinner in Manchester. I've done a lot of sportsmen's dinners, and several with Sir Alex Ferguson, and on this night it was such an occasion, and I had to interview him. We were on stage, and I got about 15 minutes into the interview, and I plucked up courage and said, it's September the 13th today, Sir Alex. Can I be so bold as to ask, have you got over May the 13th yet? Well, the stare that I got and the look, I reacted like that. Didn't know what to do with myself. I just thought I shouldn't have asked that question. And yet, 600 people in that arena, in that room, knew that I should. And I've never read anybody's thoughts before that moment, nor since, but I think I read his thoughts then, and it said, you dirty little blue supporter. But then his face just began to lighten a little. His eyes began to twinkle. There was a hint of a smile, and he said, that's football. And I'll tell you what, young man, we'll be winning it again come next May. And they did, of course. But yes, that football match, City and QPR, and I think of loads of others, but that was the one that had to stand out. My father was a keen cricketer. He was keen rugby. He played rugby and cricket. I was never a great rugby fan of either description, of either code. But I came to like rugby. I didn't dislike it. I just preferred football and cricket. That was all. And Dad was a keen cricketer, and I used to go with him, watching him play on Saturday afternoons in Shropshire. Some of them were in very rural grounds, you know, middle of, not literally cow fields, but not far off it, and played a rustic form of form of the game. But I loved it. And I'll tell you about how he took me and my brother to Edgbaston to watch Lindsay Assett's Australians against Warwickshire in 1953. I was an 8-year-old kid, and I never took my eye off a ball all day long. For an 8-year-old kid, it's quite remarkable, I think. Whereas my brother, who's 14 months older than I am, he was bored by 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I just felt sorry for him because he hated it, and he's hated cricket ever since. You know, he never liked it, whereas I was totally different. Now, this is the road where I used to live, up that further down here, and when we do the piece on Man United, I used to walk down here on my way home from school, get off the bus just on the Moses Road there, walk down here on my way home from school with my black and green blazer on my cap, and my brother was walking up where that guy is there, or that person there, and he'd got his paper bag, very similar to that. He had a paper bag, he was doing his paper round, and I'm walking down, and he stopped and he said, look at this, and it was in the stop press on the side, along with the latest racing results from Haydock Park or Kempton or whatever, and it just said about Manchester United's plane had crashed. And I said that'll be nothing. I said that'll be nothing. I said that because we lived here at 76 Wellington Road. I used to walk down from the bus stop downtown, and I met my brother halfway, and he said I said it won't be anything. I said because it's United. They'd played that previous night in Belgrade against Red Star Belgrade. They'd drawn 3 apiece, and they'd qualified for the semi-finals of the European Cup, and which was something we City fans couldn't possibly aspire to. But when I went up to the paper shop to do my own paper round, it was beginning to unfold. The whole darn thing was beginning to unfold, and the seriousness of it hit home. And it was my brother's, actually, our Alan's 14th birthday that day, February the 6th. Born on February the 6th, 1944. One of the journalists I delivered papers to in that block of flats over there, Rodmill Court, was the chief football writer for the Daily Express, and he got killed in that crash.
Oh, really?
But as I say, that's a story for another day. But Henry Rose, I used to deliver his paper every morning, and then the next morning, realisation, he's no longer. And it hit everybody very hard. It hit the nation hard. But obviously it hit Manchester very hard. And I mean, all red or blue, it didn't. We were almost at Whalley Range Cricket Club, so you can see it's about 1.5 miles from where I used to live in Fallowfield. I didn't drive, but a friend of mine, the wicket-keeper Harry Johnson, used to pick me up in his Beetle car and give me lifts back down here. The club's still going.
Yeah.
I joined the club. We go that year, 1961 again, and I'd played for my school team that morning, Chorlton Grammar School. I'd played for the team down on our school playing fields down at Nell Lane, and I'd taken a hat-trick. I'd bowled 3 straight balls. One probably shot along the ground. We didn't play on properly cultured wickets, and I might have got an LBW, but anyway, I got a hat-trick, and the umpire was an old boy of Chorlton Grammar School who played cricket for Whalley Range, and he said to me, do you want a game this afternoon? I was 16 years of age. He said, I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind. So I'll have to ask my mum and dad. In those days you had to, you couldn't gallivant off without permission. So I rang home. Can I play cricket this afternoon for Whalley Range? 3rd team, extra seconds they called it. I said yes, no problem. As long as we know where you are. I did actually manage to rush home, get my change, and I met down here at Whalley Range Cricket Club. And I played for Whalley Range at a place called Arley in Cheshire, near Northwich. Really enjoyed it and ended up playing here right through till 73 when I left. Had a couple of years at South West Manchester, 1 mile or so down the road. And then when I went to live in Denton in 75, I joined Denton Cricket Club and had some great times there. And Denton West Cricket Club as well, and played with and against some great players. Played against Joel Garner in 76 for Denton. Got some great moments. I remember one game here in particular. I was about 18 or 19. Thought I was Freddie Truman, but in reality I was only medium pace and not half as good as I probably thought I was. And we played against a team called Timperley. It was a Sunday game, not competitive, but it was competitive. They had a player called brilliant player called David Hurd, wonderful cricketer, but even more famous as a footballer because he was David Hurd, the Manchester United striker. Played in the great team of United in the 60s alongside Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law, George Best and all that. David Hurd was one of their chief goal scorers. His father, Alex Hurd, had played for Manchester City in the 30s alongside Matt Busby. But David Hurd was a very well-known, famous footballer. And I came herring in from that end where the pavilion is, herring into ball 2, and he hammered it through mid-wicket for 4 runs. Came in for the next one. Back past my feet. Boom. 4 runs. Straight driven. Whizzed past my ankles. Next one. Square cut it. Bang. Past cover point. 4 runs, and I went, "Who told you I was a City fan?" And David laughed, and everybody in the field laughed, and we got on with the game. I've always played cricket competitively, but to enjoy myself, and largely I think that's what I did. And as I say, I played for 4 clubs in all. I wasn't a great player. I got a ton on it once. The only time I got a ton was June the 14th, 1970. The wicket was somewhere over there, and looking very different to what it is now. We're in the middle of November, or approaching the middle of November, and it was during the Mexico World Cup. And then when it was all over, we went in there and watched, I think England played West Germany, and we were 2-0 up and ended up losing 3-2 in the quarter-finals. So that was the dampener on the day, but I'll never forget that day. The only century I scored. Every dog has his day, and I had my day now and again. I got clobbered a few times as well, and well remember those. But I had some great times, played against and with some great friends, made some great friends. But the biggest benefit for me was that I gave up teaching in 1987 after 20 years in the classroom, and my most famous pupil, by the way, was Michael Lavelle from Coronation Street. I gave up teaching in 1987, and a job came up for a cricket commentator for the 17 first-class counties. It was pre-Durham. There are 18 now, but it was pre-Durham. They came in 92. And I applied for the Lancashire one and got it. And for 15 years I covered Lancashire cricket for the BBC, covering every game home and away. And in that period, from 88 and 2002, Lancashire won everything but the county championship. They had the most wonderful players. Freddie Flintoff's the obvious one, but they had Mike Atherton, the England captain, the great Neil Fairbrother, Warren Hegg, the wicket-keeper. They had Paul Allott, Phil de Freitas, the great Wasim Akram through the 90s, the Pakistan wonderful player, batting and bowling. Wonderful, wonderful memories, wonderful names, and Lancashire was so successful. I commentated on 7 Lords finals. I've got a picture somewhere of me holding up the Benson and Hedges trophy when Lancashire won it in 1995 against Kent, and Aravinda de Silva, the Kent player, scored 112 and played quite the most magnificent innings, and yet was on the losing side. Those memories, and when I actually was released from my job in 2002, I was heartbroken. The worst thing that had happened to me in that period was losing my wife. She died in 1994 of cancer. That was awful, of course it was. But when I lost my job doing the Lancashire cricket, that was like a bereavement as well. Yeah. But I look back now and think, what a lucky man I was. It's where the family moved to in 1957 from Shropshire when I was 12 to Fallowfield. So obviously I didn't come into the friendship straight away, but I actually got to know the friendship through having a paper round, and it was my first call. So I became acquainted with the friendship, and of course when I became of age, so to speak, which I think even in those days was 18 to come into a pub, although it was 21 to vote. So I came in and got involved playing darts. The traditional board wasn't up in the room. They had the Manchester board, which is a great little target, very popular around these parts, and played in a Thursday league. Had some great players in the what we call the vault. We had an A and a B team. I was in the B team initially. My aim was to get into the A team. We used to play on a Thursday night in the South Manchester League. I used to get nervous because, I was a school teacher at the time, and on a Thursday I was always slightly edgy because of the darts match that night. And when I look back on it now, I think I used to get really worked up about something that was really of little importance. Nobody was interested. It wasn't national news or anything like that, but it meant so much to each and every one of us. And in the same way that golfers do, take an interest in their own game and their own handicap and the way they're playing, Dart players are just the same. Well, if somebody had said in 1967, I think it was when I first started playing darts here, that I would eventually become a darts commentator and football commentator and cricket commentator and do all these things, I would have said, it's nice of you to say so, but it's not likely to happen. I was committed to a career in teaching. But in fact, playing darts here had little bearing in the end on my role as a commentator, because, as I say, we played on the Manchester board. It wasn't until I started playing regularly at 501, and that started after I moved to East Manchester from here, a few miles away to Denton. We put a team, Denton, in the Lancashire Super League. I got in the Denton team. I learned the game. I learned a lot about the finishes and actually executed one. I remember once, on my debut for Denton, we played at Whitefield, which is sort of North Manchester, Bury area. We played at Whitefield, we got battered 8-2. But I was one of our winners. And on one leg I wanted 82 and I went bull double 16 and everybody went, what on earth made you do that? And I said, that's the standard way to go. Bobby George goes that way. If you hit the 25, it leaves you with 17 double top. 25 leaves 57. So if you're going for the bull, but knowing if you hit the 25, 17 tops. They went straight in the bull, straight in the double 16, and everybody's eyes popped out of their head. And we used to discuss finishing. It was as much a part of the game as actually playing on the board. We'd be at the bar saying, now then, this 1-2-8, why do you go for 18s first? If you hit single 18, you've got 110 left, you can go treble 20 bull. If you go for the treble 20 on 128, and you hit the single 20, there's no way you can get 108 with 2 darts. And we used to discuss this, and lots of things dawned on us, and we learned from each other. And I think that's an essential part of the game. And I see my local league now, and bless them, they all love the game every bit as much as I do. But they all have a passion for the game, but they haven't learned the finishing, and it annoys me and frustrates me when I watch them, and they want 75 and they're having to think about where to go, and they're still going for an even number. And all right, they're enjoying it. It matters not in the end. But if you're going to play the game and be serious about it, you've got to learn the finishing. And all the great players know their finishing. Occasionally Phil Taylor makes mistakes. Occasionally Dennis Priestley would make a mistake. John Lowe would make a mistake. You would never see one from Bristol. He was a calculator personified. So too Bobby George, who had his own idiosyncratic ways, but they always made sense. And other players too. Most players knew that. Jockey occasionally, bless him, loved Jockey to bits. Jockey. And then throw his shoulder into the last dart and somehow it'd find its way into the treble 20. I've got some stories about Jockey and Alan Evans, fiery and feisty little Welshman, big City fan, came and lived in Stockport and lived up here for about 16 years, became a big City fan, came and played for Denton in the Lancashire Super League, became a very, very good friend, but occasionally we didn't see eye to eye. And Alan and I have come very close to major blows, and I mean it. But bless him, yes, I fell in love with the game. As I said, when I was a child in that pub in Shropshire, and it just fascinated me, playing in the pub, an empty pub, seeing the darts and having a throw. And then, of course, when I saw it later on, it was a challenge that I couldn't resist. And every dart player who plays the game will tell you it's the challenge between you and that board. And to be honest, I don't play anymore. I played up until about 2.5 years ago. But I no longer play because my powers had diminished to such an extent that I was being beaten by people who once upon a time wouldn't have lived with me. And I said to the team, if you're genuinely stuck and I'm in the room, I will not let you down. I'll play, but until that moment comes, I'm bowing out. From playing Super League for Denton, I then started comparing the games when we played visiting teams. Morecambe would travel all the way from there, teams from around the Greater Manchester area, from various parts of the northwest, and then eventually that resulted in my being promoted to refereeing the Lancashire games on stage. Dickie Bowen suit and everything, 120, 40 and all this. And Lancashire would play, when Lancashire played Staffordshire, Bristow was in the Staffordshire team, and I got to know the players that way. John Lowe played for Derbyshire, Bob Anderson and Cliff Lazarenko played for Surrey. London had a very strong team. Keith Deller played for them, Bristow later on. And so I got on the exhibition circuit, doing exhibitions with Bristow and Jockey Wilson and Alan Evans and that. And then eventually, because of my connections with Piccadilly Radio, I'd got broadcasting experience. When I actually reported on the Embassy World Championships for BBC Radio Sport from 1990 to 99. During that period, of course, the schism came along, the split, and I was in the eye of the storm, not as a participant as such, but certainly as a witness to it. Going down to the World Championships at Frimley Green and seeing the WDC being formed and gradually breaking away from the BDO, negotiations breaking down. And then when the final break came and they needed television commentators, they roped in myself and Dave Lanning. Dave Lanning, a voice for television from ITV over previous decades. Myself, a brand new voice. And of course, eventually Sky came along and Dave and I did the first World Championship. We were eventually joined by Sid in the summer of '94 at the first ever World Match Play, and the three of us worked as a team for a good decade before Stuart Pike joined it, and then others came along, and then later on in 2011 Sid was taken ill, contracted cancer. Dave had already retired in 2010, and there were big changes, and I decided that I would bow out in 2013, which is what I did. Although I still go back and do the odd guest appearance. I commentated on all 16 Phil Taylor's world titles. His first two in the BDO for BBC Radio Sport, and the 14 that he has collected for the PDC on Sky Sports as a commentator. And yet, the biggest moment for me was the one he lost in 2007, when he and Raymond van Barneveld, who was fresh to the PDC, he'd moved across from the BDO, a move that gained the world's attention, because Barney was the number one from the BDO at the time, undisputed. Phil Taylor, the undisputed number one for that, and they met a few times during that 2006 year. Barney beat Taylor at Bolton in the quarterfinals of the UK Open with a fantastic display, amazing game. And then he came from 2 sets down to beat Taylor in the semi-final of the Desert Classic a few weeks later in Las Vegas. I think Taylor did Barney once in the Premier League, and Barney, they shared the spoils at Bournemouth, I remember, when Barney came back from 7-4 down. But the one that really mattered was the World Championship a few months later, on January the 1st, the final, 2007. Taylor and Barney. And Barney was 3-0 down, or should I say Taylor 3-0 up, because Barney hadn't turned up. And in 3 sets. I can't remember how many legs. Let's say it was 3-2, 3-1, 3-0. In which case it would have been 12 legs. Barney hadn't hit a 180. He finished the match with 21 180s because he picked up in the 4th set. After which, Dave Lanning was replaced in the commentary box by myself. Sid was there for the duration of the final. Because we still thought Taylor would win, maybe 7-2, 7-3. As it turns out, Barney's fight back was so remarkable. They both played fantastic darts. And you've got to speak volumes for Barney's character. His resilience, and he hit back and took it all the distance. 6 sets all, sudden death. Tops he wants. And Barneveld is the champion of the world. And Barney down on his knees, his arms in the air, and it's iconic, that the voice and the picture together. Probably the pinnacle of world darts. And I know there have been great games since, but that was the first, what I would call, great game between the top 2 players in the world. And I'm not undermining the final of 2004, 3 years previously, when Kevin Painter took Taylor all the way. And Kevin Painter had a chance to become world champion. And even to this day, if Kevin's watching this, will not thank me for reminding him of it. I'm not undermining that wonderful final in 2004. This was special because it was the 2 giants of the time. It was, if you like, it was Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. It was of that magnitude. Yeah, that's my favourite darting moment. And lots of others, but that is my favourite. The other one that I have to mention was when Michael van Gerwen hit a 9-darter, and I was commentating with Stuart Pike, and Stuart Pike took out the last 3 arrows. So Michael van Gerwen then starts the next leg with treble 180. 180. So it's my turn to take it out on what could be, for the first time in darting history, 9 darters in successive legs. Now that's like a golfer hitting 2 holes in one in succession. It's like 2 1-4-7 breaks in successive frames. And he got the treble 20, yes. He got the treble 19, yes. Double 12, oh, and he just missed. Well, actually, in fairness, he was near a half an inch away. And I remember saying on the night when I was inducted into the PDC Hall of Fame, having retired, saying that had he got that, I was asked the question, what would you have said had he got that double 12? I said I would not have had to have retired. I said I'd have probably got sacked for what. But yeah, that was a magic moment, and had that gone in, I'd have had to put that in as the biggest moment of my commentary life, even above Barney's. But somebody will do it one day. There are that many of them now. The quality and the standard, 100 averages are ordinary now. Phil Taylor was the only one that hit them. Occasionally, somebody would come along and hit a 100 average. Certainly Dennis Priestley had the ability to do that, but he was the only one who consistently. Now, of course, Van Gerwen, Gary Anderson, but so much talent around, and new players coming through. Rob Cross, I mean, that lad's just amazing. The new players coming through, and it's brilliant for the game. I'd known Sid for a few years, and Sid remembers me bumping into him in the BBC in Manchester when it was on Oxford Road once, and saying, "Oh, Sid Waddell, great to meet you. I can't wait for the day when I'm sitting in your seat commentating," jokingly. And Sid always reminded me of this. He said, "Oh, I knew right from the start you were after my job." And Sid and I first teamed up in '94 at the World Match Play at Blackpool, and I think we became a force. Sid was the main man. I don't pretend for one moment that it was otherwise. He'd already established himself with the BBC. He was effectively one of the great voices of darts. He used to say to me, John, if it's not adding to the pictures, it's not worth saying. And I dwelt on that, and I applied that after there. What's the point of saying he wants 888? Oh, he's missed. The viewer can see it. React. Oh, dear, dear, dear. Oh, no, not again. That is a far better way of expressing that he's missed, because everybody can see that. You're telling them what they can see. And I learned a lot from Sid in that way. He also gave me a lot of confidence, and I'm sure fellow commentators would say the same, who came after me. People like Stuart Pike and Nigel Pearson and people like that would say the same, because Sid was always willing to pass on that expertise that he'd himself built up over the years. And he was a clever man, intelligent guy. And he always gave me encouragement, because occasionally I'd come out with my own quip. I remember once when Phil Taylor hit a 26, it was in the World Match Play, I think it was a semi-final against, or it might have been in the final against Alan Warner in 2000. And Taylor hit 26, and I said, the last time Taylor hit 26, Blackpool Rock was a fishing hazard. And Sid went, I wish I'd said that, Johnny boy. And I got a little nudge. As he said it. And I felt so good, because I thought, Sid. And I hate to say this in a way, but I don't think I always got quite the credit that I was entitled to for the way that Sid and I played as a double act. And when the plaudits are handed out, it was Sid, Sid, Sid. And I'm not saying that generally, because people say to me, I love listening to you and Sid together. But I think in the hierarchy of the game, they see Sid and John was just sort of the Ernie Wise of the show, if you like. I don't say that with regret or bitterness or anything. I think it's a fact. But working with Sid was brilliant, and we did fall out once or twice, you know, because you'll laugh at this. Because we used to get told off occasionally for talking across each other. And Sid used to say, John, we mustn't talk across each other. Andy Finn, our director, he's going berserk. So I'd wait until he'd finish saying, then I'd start to say something. And straight away Sid would jump in. And what was happening was Sid, and bless him, he did it because he was impulsive. He did it because he was spontaneous. He did it because that was his forte. That was his strength. If something came into his mind, it had to be said. And sometimes he was just a little bit insensitive to his co-commentator, whether it be me or Dave or whoever. And so, one night, it was at 97, we had the World Pairs at Bognor Regis, Butlins. And we'd had a little bit of difference of opinion over who was doing the butting in and who was not, because we were getting into trouble. And I said, Sid, you asked me to not butt in. I said, so I wait until you finish, then I start to say something, and straight away you jump in. Oh, no, I don't. No. I said, well. And we actually didn't speak for 2 or 3 days. I think it was the only 2 or 3 days we didn't speak in 17 years. We got on like a house on fire. And Dave occasionally used to say to me, when Sid was being interviewed, or Sid was wanted for this, or Sid was wanted for that. And Dave, who's a great mate of Sid's for 40 years, they started together in the 70s, early 70s on Indoor League. He used to occasionally say to me, used to look up like, we're not really here. Meaning he and that's understandable, you know, because he was a wonderful commentator in his own right. I think I was, generally acknowledged. And to see all the weight of the praise going in one direction irked me a bit, but it didn't affect the relationship, because we knew that Sid was a bit special, and it remained that way right from the first time at Blackpool in '94 to the last time we worked together at Sunderland, the first ever World Cup of Darts in 2010, when Dave decided to end it. Wonderful. I miss him a hell of a lot, you know. Now I miss him a hell of a lot. On the day he died, and he'd been suffering from cancer for some time, his last real appearance on Sky was the 2011 World Match Play. And he did appear as a very ill man at the Manchester Premier League, the first round of Premier League matches in 2012. And he put me in for Taylor versus Lewis, first game up. And that was the last time I worked with him, in February of 2012. It's one of the saddest days of my life, because darts lost one of its most magic personalities. I think from being very young I always wanted to be involved in sport. If not good, I wasn't good enough as a player, but I got lots of fun out of playing amateur sport, as you will have realised. Then the next best thing is to be involved in the media, and especially as a commentator. And I think even as a youngster I privately wanted to be a sports journalist. I used to do party pieces and stand up and do commentaries, horse racing and football and cricket, and I used to take off John Arlott. Now you're too young to know who John Arlott was, but Arlott was the great voice of cricket of the 1950s, 60s and 70s. And I used to stand up and do my party piece as Truman comes in now from the Stretford end in bowls, and the balls outside the off stump. Boycott slashes at it. Oh, he should have gone before he came out to bat. Something like that it went anyway, and the umpire's finger goes up. Boycott didn't like that. You know, that kind of thing. I used to do John Arlott and Raymond Glendenning and horse racing, and people used to say to me, after a cricket match at Whalley Range or whatever, John, everyone's had a few beers, do your sports report. And I'd come in, welcome to the 5 o'clock show, and we're going to Old Trafford, and I'd interview Matt Busby, and I'd do, you know, all these things, all these little impersonations. And people used to say, you should be in that business, you should be commentating. And I went into school teaching, and eventually made my mind up that after 20 years in the classroom, or then it was 13, because my career's overlapped by 7 years, till I went full-time as a commentator on the cricket call. I'd still love to be doing the darts more regularly than I do. I get the odd guest appearance. And without naming names, I have my favourite commentators, and I have the commentators I'm not very fond of. Mainly the ones who tell you what you're already looking at, you know, and don't embellish it. But even though I'm 72, I'm reasonably fit, and I've no intention of retiring until it retires me. I still get to watch City whenever I can. I'm very well looked after. The club give me complimentary tickets. They look after me with refreshments in the President's room, and my 2 grandsons are also big City fans now. I have a great admiration for Manchester United, because they are a magnificent advertisement for this great city. I still love my childhood days in Shropshire, in rural Shropshire, but they mean a lot to me. But Manchester's extra special.